I'm Amy from Core Project Advisory.
I'm Sonya. I'm a project manager and document control manager at Core Project Advisory.
Oh, I should have mentioned I'm a senior document controller and project administrator as well. So there you go. That's who we are. Today we're going to talk to you about integrated document management systems. And
yes,
quiz one.
Hot topic. Mm-hmm. Very big topic. I don't know how long we have, but
3 months, I think we might need.
Probably, yeah.
So I guess looking at different management systems, you want to imagine you're starting a project or you're coming in partway through a project that's already off the ground, off and running, and then all of a sudden, everybody's worst nightmare, they want to change management systems.
That is a nightmare.
And it's happened probably most projects I've worked on, to be honest. Yeah. Well, we're a consultancy firm as well. So I personally, in my day-to-day, I look after multiple clients and different projects on all different parts of Australia. So some might be running one system, some might be running another one. Can I manage any system? Of course I can, because I will train myself in that before I start. So yeah,
that's why we're experts, right?
Yes, people, we will take anything on. So, and we will train ourselves adequately and our staff. So yeah, Sonya, what have you experienced?
Well, I think one of the biggest things about integrated management systems and systems in general is that I feel like in my earlier days as a document controller, whether you were on client side or contractor side, there was a system, maybe a secondary system used by one or the other of those sides. And it was basically relatively straightforward. And, no matter whether it was a joint venture or whether it was a couple of different contractors, you would have people all kind of, in the same system. I feel like nowadays it is getting a little bit more complicated because, a lot of contractors, not just tier ones, but, other contractors as well are becoming, quality ISO certified, as are we. We have our own system, we have our own protocols and procedures. So it is becoming more challenging because when you come to join a project, you've got your own system, but yet there could be something already in place that's totally different.
And also on that, generally, as a contractor and working for the client, you might even have your own numbering system.
Yes.
So that's also,
how many times have we seen that?
Yes. And you do not want to have 5 numbers on one document. But
no.
However, so you need to work out, first of all, what direction is that going in? Is your number able to be on the document you're giving to the client? As a client, are you going to accept a contractor third-party number, or are you going to also actually have the metadata field to list what their number is as well, so that you can actually better track?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think all of that can really be managed. And I think people get a little terrified thinking, oh my God, like we have this procedure and it must be followed and we have to embed that on everybody else. Yes, I agree with all those things. But in that second numbering experience, you can adequately manage that process if there's a process and a procedure and people are trained how to do it and how to inform properly, with their staff. And I think if you are able to get away with it and manage it that way and everyone's in agreement and across the same page, the biggest thing I always say to people is, if I wanted to find this drawing or this document,
that's a bit good. Yes.
in 5 years' time,
yeah,
how would I find it?
That's a good.
Do I use that number? Do I use what's in the title block? Do I use an area or a location acronym or numerical sequence as, location or whatever? And that's the key thing, is that you want to put yourself in the shoes of the person that either has to own that asset later, whether it be a building or, a plant or pipeline. Or I still recall some numerical sequences from my very early days in document control.
2571.
Because that's how relevant they were at the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And as a doc controller, you look at those numbers and they mean something. Whereas I feel like if you do get a little too complicated and try to sort of cover too many bases, that's when it can get really confusing for other people. And you want to make sure that your people working on things here and now, whether it even be business processes and business numbering for a normal day-to-day, a procedure of how to do your timesheet, you want to make sure that it's PRO, for instance, procedure number 5. Oh, that's the timesheet.
Right. Exactly.
You want to get paid, don't you?
Why miss out on your documents? Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point too, because I've seen, probably could almost say I've seen things done every single way that you could possibly do them. So it's definitely important as with the project when you've got the startup meetings. If you're the client or you are the contractor or whatever, you sit down and you have your startup meetings and you talk about these kind of processes. How do we want to receive information? What do we want to show? And you need to work with your team, whether you have document control team or if you're going to use, a lot of people have graduate engineers start out in that kind of role if they're in a smaller tier. You need to gather together and go, right, we want to capture their numbers as well, because that's how there's all listed and numbered, or we don't. And then also you can look at options where if you've got a contracting team sending you documents in your database that are potentially going to just be relevant to the project and the build and what's happening, do they start with their organisation code so that you can really separate them? And that's your numbering with their organisation code because that's who sent it. Then you might have 5 contractors on that job. You can literally go through the organisation codes and see that's X, Y, and Z contractor. And then potentially when you move into, which we're doing on a project, when you move into the role of like this stuff is going to be what's handed over at the end, you might just drop the organisation code so it's just project specific. So there's lots of ways.
There really is.
Right.
And it's a good point too, because, this isn't also, document control isn't just for project delivery and, construction delivery. It's a big business thing as well. And you've got to have good business procedures. And we have done rollouts for companies before in the doc control space where it's just purely about their in-house business procedures and documentation and helping them number that, in a sequence that makes sense to them as a business. And, if we were doing stuff for us, it might be CPA for core project advisory.
Yeah.
That might be as simple as it is, -PRO procedure -0001. Easy, done. It doesn't have to be this over complex, 20 acronym long numbering.
And then you don't want to
sequence.
have the organisation of the contractor, then the client's number, and then the archive number, and then you want to keep it all as simple as possible. And it can be done. You can have multiple. You can have multiple metadata fields in your document management system, or you can just keep it quite simple.
And even like another way to sort of go about that multi-layered experience is doing like a mapping exercise. So, we've done this before with other clients where they might not be happy with where they are, or they're getting bigger as a business, or they've got a new project that comes along and they want to go, well, this isn't a business, this is an actual project and we want to number it differently. And you can do that sort of mapping exercise as well, so that you take, I guess, the essence of, your original recipe of how you document number your own stuff, but then, have the ability to make it flexible so you can do projects and other things as well. And then, if it's department level as well, especially if you're a business that's getting bigger, you can start breaking out into, okay, well, it's not just, 5 of us in an office anymore. It's actually now 100 of us, and we have a HR department and we have an IT department, and, we need to separate those sort of procedures. So it's definitely possible. And when you're moving from, multiple different systems as well, which is kind of where we started with this conversation, is you come along and go, oh, we're using this and now we're using this, then you straight up need to get clear who's using what's the biggest thing? Source of truth.
Exactly.
That is the most important conversation you need to have with client, contractor, whoever it is, is where are people going to go? And where is this stuff going to end up?
Yeah.
That's the 2 things.
Well, that's the ultimate, isn't it, of every project. Where do we get it from? What do we do with it while we've got it? And where does it end up?
Yeah. And we all know there's plenty of Microsoft Suite applications. There is other collaboration tools and collaboration systems out there that all, offer these APIs now, which is fantastic for people that want to, have a collaboration space, but as well be able to integrate that into, dashboards or Power BI or any kind of system where they need to report things back to their, own quality ISO standard system, which is really important. And, have that ability and flexibility to make it work automatically, which is a big thing, not like the old days where you're carrying a piece of paper from one end of the place to the other. So
what would be some big integrations that you've dealt with? And because you're in project management sector as well, so what do you think would be some that you find really beneficial?
Yeah, I think definitely when you're doing project delivery work, you need to be able to capture all that commercial contracts admin, paperwork, decisions, whether it be electronically or, old school on a form, doesn't matter. It's about how you capture it, where you put it afterwards so that you can source it efficiently. And there is, what do I say? A source of truth?
Yes.
That'll be my new slogan.
Hargreaves.
And, that's the biggest thing I see in the project management space is you have to be able to collate those items because they're the first things that are going to either go wrong or you might need to, adjust a variation or something like that. And you need to sort of backtrack then and go, okay, well, was there an RFI and how did I get to this sort of space? So being able to organise those things, and if that means, which quite often we do have when we do project management roles with clients, there is a system that we might be working in, but then there's a company system as well. So that stuff has to sort of make its way back in and have a procedure and protocol around how that's done.
Yeah, it's like there's a big umbrella, I guess, for corporations, and then they have the corporation, which might be multi-international company, and then they'll have a little project going on potentially the Sunshine Coast. They might have a project going on in Dubai. They might have a project going on in America, and they've got their main corporation and their main, I guess, archival system, right? And then the project rollout, they've got a database management system that controls the project and all the comings and goings, but they want all of that information to end up under that big umbrella and back in their management system. So I haven't personally worked with systems that completely integrate and talk to each other, that you just hit a button and that sends it back to the archival system. Normally it would be download from one area and then store it where it needs to go. There are some ways to integrate, I guess, the information into different systems, so to speak. So you've still got to generally do a lot of pulling stuff out and popping it where it needs to go. But when you put it into the new system, is it going to speak to all areas of metadata like it did on the project? So, yeah, that's always a tough one.
Yeah, and that's that, I guess, mapping exercise that has to take place beforehand. And the other thing is that at the end of all this, there's data warehouses as well that have to capture and, look after all this information. And that's a whole world of something that we won't get into today, but definitely not. But, that's a big thing too for a lot of companies. And, is the information held in Australia? Is it overseas? They're big questions to sort of, for businesses to start thinking about, not only just in the project space, but from a company perspective.
What about the age-old favourite where you might start with a company and a project's 6 months along and then they say, oh, actually, we get a better deal with X system, we're going to change systems. And potentially they might have thousands of documents in their current system. They have all the correspondence in their current system, RFIs. How do you then switch to a new system? You've got a lot of unhappy contractors having to learn new systems. You also might have a lot of the smaller companies that might not have document control and they might only have a folder structure of how they manage their own documents, and they've just learnt this system and now they've got to learn another system. And then what happens in between time when you're changing systems? Where does everything go? Do they just email each other? Like, how have you found anything in relation to that?
Ooh, that's a big one. I think as well,
I try very hard to say, please don't change systems, but then,
Well, look, sometimes it can be for reasons, sometimes it can be for not so great reasons, but I think at the end of the day, it's whatever's going to be beneficial for the person making the decisions. So, and that's not always us, which is fine. But the biggest thing is understanding straight up front, where are we going with this and how long will that current system stay in play and what will come forward. So you need to understand, okay, out of the 100 RFIs or the 10,000 documents, what are we bringing over? Because I do try to sort of speak with clients about, okay, that's fine. You want to change systems, no problem. But it's also really beneficial if you happen to be at a point in time where design might be finished or maybe pre-concept or some sort of milestone event where you can go, okay, no worries. Let's cut off at design completion. That's we'll call that our cutoff, and we'll make it date X. And then from there, at least everybody is on the same page with where that line in the sand is, and then you can make decisions to move forward. Because quite often, if you're going to a different system, it may or may not be the home client system. So all of that stuff, instead of going to the new, let's say, collaboration system, it can actually just go straight into the client system as a record to be archived, in the future. And it doesn't actually need to go to that first step of going to the new collaboration system because it's not required any longer, but it still can be referred to by, relevant people. Yeah. So those are the things I would see as the first conversation pieces to have is, what's the system? Where are we going to with this?
Yeah.
And, what's the milestone cutoff? What date do you want this to happen? Because that's a big thing. And you never can underestimate a migration activity. I cannot stress that enough.
I keep thinking they're going to be easier than they are, but they never are. They never are.
But it is, yeah. And two, it depends on how much the volume and what you're coming from and what you're going to, as how much manual entry might need to occur.
And I think
systems.
That's one that the management area of generally client side, if we're talking that they might not actually really understand, like the inside of like how long does it actually take to get that process happening. So yeah, it's hard to sort of estimate as well, I guess, but it can take 3 months to change from one system to another. So I guess having as much information as possible. Yes, it's possible to change systems, but there's a timeline and it does take process, and there's a lot of manual work, and there's you've got to allow, I guess, for, dare I say, human error, but it can be a little bit getting documentation into the new system and getting off and running. You're also setting up new systems as well. So you might have ways that your project's running really smoothly and you like it, and you just want to change systems, but you want it to actually work the exact same way that it was working in the previous system. So therefore, I know in our team, we work closely with N8 and Teambinder. So we can structure Teambinder pretty much however we want because we've been working with it for a very, very long time. And I'm not biased towards Teambinder. I've used many different data management systems, but if we were integrating it in there, we can literally get it set up and running as close to a lot of different systems as possible, or there might even be more beneficial little improvements that we can do there. But I think it's important too because you also need a bridging area. Because you can't just turn one off, turn one on. You've got to do a lot of testing before you have the system up
and training.
You've got to have
training is
you've got to super crucial. Train everybody.
And identifying, to your point earlier, about what are you going to lose? What functionality are you going to lose moving from one to the other as well?
Yeah, yeah. No, we had a project recently where they sort of wanted the cutoffs. A lot of people might just run their current project until the new system's ready to go, but this company specifically wanted a cutoff date from one system. They didn't care when the next system started. They just wanted the cutoff date. So there we were stuck with like the bridging. Where does everything go until the new project's up and running? And yes, it was a bit of a challenge. A member of our team did a fantastic job and set up a fantastic platform where they can, a lot more manual entry, a lot more document controller's worst nightmare, spreadsheets were involved and reporting, and everything was basically listed on the spreadsheet, which we're trying to step away from that. We want everything to be through the system as much as possible. But it's actually worked out. There were a few teething issues, I think, at the start. And then now I know that the new project, the demo system, is going through its final stages. We've got everything pretty much exactly how we want it, and we're ready to roll it out. And
the important thing there too was, for that experience too, keeping the client informed about that journey as well. And, you know, they end up being really happy with that bridging experience. And, you know, I think
they're quite looking forward to getting into the new system. Some of them were like, oh, can we just stay doing it this way? But then it's like...
Well, whilst it was a challenge, it's still like an experience to be able to run that smoothly as well, because it's not an ideal scenario, but it's a scenario that can be done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think you've got to also be on top of archive and how long, because you've obviously got a lot of information in the first system, so you want to make sure you've got good archiving rights to that information for duration of how long you might need it for, or are you going to then look at pulling everything out of there and storing that electronically, or but no, it's possible to successfully integrate different data management systems for sure, and a lot of early planning definitely needs to start off, but
absolutely
experience with it.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you very much for listening to our podcast on data integration and data system management. You have to join us again for our next podcast, where we discuss topics all project related, and we deliver it in as grounded way as possible. And we'll catch you next time.